I had graduated from Command and General Staff College before I went over there, ordered to the Far East Command initially, and soon right after the Korean War started. And I had with me a whole footlocker of all the manuals that I used to as texts in the Command and General Staff College, a 2-year normal college course condensed into 3.5 months. Well, anyway, I took all these manuals with me. Namakawa wanted to borrow some of me somehow. I guess I told him I had these manuals. And ended up giving him the whole footlocker full. And he was like a sponge, so thirsty for the kind of knowledge that he was learning from them. And he would get a hold of me on the phone or something at any hour of the day or almost any hour of the night and ask me questions. He couldn't quite reconcile this paragraph of this manual and this paragraph of this one. He didn't understand. Right. And I would spend a few minutes explaining it to him. And I didn't know until a long time later that everything he was learning from those manuals and from me, he in his turn was teaching classes to General Hayashi and all of his general and special staff, top military brass, and the civilian control over the military, what we would call Secretary of Defense, and all the bureau chiefs and everything. They were all in his class, learning all this stuff. And they don't like to delegate authority to anybody. They like to keep full control in their hands. Initially, they wanted to have such control that if someone in a unit way up in the northern part of Hokkaido wanted to promote a private to a private first class, they'd have to recommend it through staff, through channels, and go up to the top level to get approval. Well, that was so ridiculous. So I went on the steps of the Merchant Marine Academy building where we both had our headquarters, the NPR and our advisory and control group under MacArthur. And I sat on the steps and I went into what I like to refer to, you've heard this expression, shift down into 4th degree concentration.
Yeah, I think we said it.
And I came up with definitions of the different levels of authority and responsibility for approvals of different actions at different levels. Called them major policy, applied to the civilian control. Command policy, General Hayashi, what we would call chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and his general staff chiefs, and routine operations. Boy, they like that phraseology, which would delegate down to lower levels all of these minor promotions and minor decisions in furtherance of and implementation of orders from above. And it was written up in such a fashion, I've spent a lot of time on that thing, and after
that was your composition, huh?
That was my composition.
Okay.
And after a hefty session, which I wasn't attending these sessions between Hayashi and the civilian control people, Secretary of Defense, Masahara, and others. I wasn't attending those meetings, but I knew from what Namakawa was telling me what was going on. So after one of the meetings, I gestured to Hayashi, and I gave him a copy of what I had written out in detail, what I had worked out on those definitions of authority and where at what level approvals had to be obtained for major policy, command policy, routine operations. And I asked him to look it over and to see what he thought about it. A couple of days later, he saw me and he was delighted with it. He had gone to the Prime Minister with it, and the Prime Minister published it as a Prime Minister's Office ordinance, what we would call an executive order of the President. It was published with practically no change in what I had written. Now, when
Was it translated into Japanese?
Oh yeah, well, see, I was the senior advisor at the national level, and I had to sign approval for anything affecting this force. 3 copies in English, 3 copies in Japanese. That's when I have been given a Han, my official registered
Right.
signature,
Right.
which nobody else could use.
I know.
I remember they had me make my choice. The words Ro and Ken, they had no L.
Right.
Ro and Ken could appear in 4 times 3, 12 different combinations, meaning different things.
Right.
And one of them, I remember, was an anile old woman. Another one was an ancient and honorable sword. Of course, that's the one I selected.
Yeah. But you know, we have a different translation for that.
You do?
Yeah, it's a nice one, but I won't try to recall it right now.
Okay.
We can tell you that because we have the definition of all those kanjis and everything.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
sometime I'll tell you that.
Yeah. All right.
It's a nice one though.
Now, what I don't know, well, okay, the peace treaty negotiated with Japan went into effect in April of 1952. I had gone over there in 1950. I chose that time to go home and rejoin my family. And the peace treaty went into effect and it was approved in Washington, and I went home. On the eve of my departure, Hayashi sent 2 of his top brass over to present this to me. And I knew it was a treasure of his, and I felt greatly honored. I know there's a sequel to this. When under MacArthur in occupation days had been part of the occupation forces, an advisory and control group, of which I was a senior advisor at the national level, now had to go under the embassy as an American Advisory and Assistance Group, primarily concerned with observing and training the host country personnel in the maintenance and care and proper use of all of the armaments that we were providing for them. And in diplomatic protocol fashion, the names of anybody who, they would have diplomatic status under the embassy. The names of anybody going to the host country with diplomatic status had to be submitted in advance to the would-be host country to give them a chance, if they so chose, to declare anyone on there as persona non grata. Their names would be withdrawn. What did the Japanese do with that list? They gave it to the man who would be most affected by it, the head of their Yobitai, Hayashi. Now, at this time, I'd come back to the States and was assigned at Fort Ord as a general staff officer. And I learned later that when Hayashi looked at this list and examined it, whatever else he might have said, he was reported to have said he would like to have seen Colonel Loken's name on that list. I got yanked out of Fort Ord so fast you wouldn't believe it. My head spun.
Send you back to Japan.
Sent me right back to Japan. This time under the embassy, 3 months later, I could have my family join me. Quarters had been arranged and everything. The first time Gladys met General Hayashi, we were at a joint Japanese and American affair. I remember the huge ice sculpture. They liked those big ice sculptures.
Right. Do you remember what it was a sculpture of?
An elephant.
An elephant?
Yeah. And we were standing there looking at this, and I saw someone out of the corner of my eye in peripheral vision approaching. And I looked and I said to Gladys, "Oh, here comes General Hayashi." And he came over, and I introduced the 2 of them. And he said to Gladys, "I like your husband very much."
Yeah.
And
In his halting English, huh?
yeah, his halting English. Well, I think that's enough of the story behind this.
Well, that's it.